Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.
Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you and thank you for watching Conversations with Jennylyn. Today, I have another fabulous guest for you. My guest is Canadian Superior Court Judge Irving Andre. And Irving is going to tell us how and what it's like and how the laws are different on the Supreme Court in Canada compared to the United States, if he knows. But we're anxious to hear what it's like to be a Supreme Court judge in Canada. Welcome to the show, Irving.
Thank you very much, and good evening to you and good evening to your listeners. Just one correction, it's the Superior Court, not the Supreme Court, the Superior Court.
Superior Court, sorry.
That's right. So go right ahead. But again, as I said, it's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Irving, you're originally from the West Indies, am I correct?
You're absolutely correct, Jennylyn.
So tell us how you got to where you are today, because that's the goal of why I do this, to show someone that you can come from anywhere and be born in any circumstance, but you can choose to make a success of your life.
Well, you're absolutely correct. I mean, my passage has been somewhat unusual. I was actually born in Curacao. Curacao, as many of your listeners may know, is a former Dutch colony. Way in the south of the Caribbean, and my parents went to Curacao during the Second World War. Well, my father went during the Second World War to work in the oil industry, and then my mother followed years later. So I was one of 5 siblings who were born in Curacao. My father came back to Dominica, where he was born. Both my parents were born in Dominica in the 60s, and I grew up in Dominica. I went to high school, primary school and high school. And then I was fortunate to have gotten a scholarship to go study at the University of the West Indies in Mona, Jamaica. And then I returned to Dominica in 1981. And I taught for about 9 months. I got a scholarship to go to Johns Hopkins University in the United States. So I went there and I stayed there for 2 years. I left somewhat prematurely, because I was enrolled in a PhD course in history. I had second thoughts, and suffice it to say that I decided to move to Canada, which I did in '84. Again, I worked 1 year, then I went back to school, I studied law. Then I worked in a legal profession as a prosecutor, as an assistant crown attorney, and in 2002 as a provincial court judge doing criminal law exclusively. And then in 2012, I moved to the Superior Court, where I do literally all types of law on the bench. I preside in a jurisdiction called Brampton in Ontario, which is the largest province in Canada. And I've lived here, as I indicated to you, since 1984. So again, my passage has been somewhat unusual, but one which is totally attainable, because quite frankly, it's just a matter of just dedicating oneself to achieving certain goals. One doesn't have to be some super intelligent individual to achieve those goals, but one just has to have a sense of determination, a sense of dedication to succeed. And the good thing, as I always say to people, young lawyers and so on, is that if I can do it, then quite frankly, anyone can. It's as simple as that, you know? So there's no mystery, no magic formula, no particular special gift. Just good old-fashioned, the sweat of your brow, so to speak. That's how I look at it.
But wait, I have to say this. You left the United States and went to Canada? Why?
I certainly did so. I spent 2 years at Baltimore, Maryland, and I didn't mind it, but there were certain aspects of that life which I didn't particularly enjoy, let's put it that way. Coming from the islands, again, it was somewhat of a shock to the system to end up in a city where there was clearly issues of race, to be honest with you.
Really? You felt that?
Oh, so absolutely. I was regarded as a novelty at Johns Hopkins, a graduate student. some of the students would ask me rather interesting questions about how did I find myself at Johns Hopkins. Exotic questions, I
No.
determined them. And after a while, it was something that you couldn't avoid. And there was an alienation which set in after a while. And I started to question, look, I mean, where exactly, what would be my goals as a recently graduated PhD student in history? Inevitably, I would probably have to gravitate towards teaching at a university, likely in the United States. And I started wondering, is that something that I wanted so dearly that I would remain and complete the program I'd started? I always had two goals, either to be a history professor or a lawyer. So what happened is that at some point I decided to do the LSAT, which is the examinations that you must take and pass, hopefully, to get into law school, and I did, and as they say, the rest is history. So it was just a matter of gravitating towards those goals, or the goal which I felt I needed to pursue. Not doing something, not move into another field of study was not an option. Um, from the time I grew up, education was always the be all and the end all. And there was no ifs, ands, or buts. There was no family wealth to fall back on. My father was a voracious reader, and at least I got that from him. And and coming from the islands, Dominica, as you know, has had no university. It still does not. There's a college right now.
Yes.
Um, so the whole business of further education had necessarily to involve migration. And coming to an environment such as North America, certainly coming to the United States, where there are literally tens of thousands of universities, even coming to Canada, which doesn't have as many, but certainly compared to Dominica, was an oasis of sorts in terms of the opportunities for further education. To me, it was whether I had the mental fortitude to take advantage of that type of oasis where there were so many avenues for further study. So it wasn't difficult for me after I went to Canada. I worked for 1 year to get what we describe here as Canadian experience, which would involve a different session entirely. But after doing so, I reapplied. I should indicate I applied to go to law school in Canada when I was still in the States, and I got through. But instead of starting law school in that September, I decided to work for obvious reasons, to get a little economic resources, be able to move out on my own. And so I worked for 1 year at a workers' compensation board in Toronto. And I was fortunate that when I reapplied, I got it accepted again, and I started law school in September of 1985. But to me, there was no ifs, ands, or buts about that which I had set out to do, which is to say, to qualify in a particular field where at the opportune time, I had the ability to become my own boss. I should say that after 3 years, almost 3 years as an assistant crown attorney, I opened my practice, criminal
Wow.
law practice. I practiced with about 5 other lawyers. I have to buy in a century-old building in the middle of the city that I presently live. It's called Brampton. Population is about 550,000 people. And I practiced, and as I said, in 2002 again, by then I had 2 kids. I still have 2 kids, I should say. The practice was colliding, I should say, with family life. So at the invitation of a local judge, I applied for a position on a bench, and I was successful. So it was typically one of those situations of being in the right place at the right time. So again, I've been fortunate. And I would like to think that, again, my passage is not necessarily unusual, at least for someone who's established certain goals, whether it's in the legal field, in the medical field, or accounting, you name it. The critical thing is to establish some goals and to set about achieving those goals. That's the magic formula. There's nothing special. There's no hidden formula. just that basic philosophy. You set your goals and you achieve it, and you try to achieve it, or you work towards achieving those goals.
I love your story. I am just enjoying hearing how you journeyed and got to where you are today. It made me very sad when you described what you encountered at Johns Hopkins. What makes me more sad is this is so many years later, and this type of prejudice is still stifling. I cannot tell you how many people I've spoken to who've experienced this. And I'm looking at you and I see a guy who is not black skinned, right? Could you imagine when people have black skin, what that is like? And fortunately, you didn't let them stop your journey. You didn't let their judgments prevent you from going to the next level and attaining your goals. But there are a lot of people who get discouraged and they develop complexes and they think, because I look like this or because my skin is this color, I can't be successful. Because the people that should be my comrades, who should be egging me on because we're doing the same thing, they're making me question my worth. And if I should be doing this because of how I look. And I have to tell you that I'm a Black woman. I call myself a Black woman. I could be many different, I have several ethnicities, but I choose Black because I was raised with a Black family. And for me, that's how I identify. But it shouldn't matter. And the reason I'm mentioning it, it's because people who don't know that I'm Black have said a lot of prejudicial things to me about other people in company that are Black. And I don't know if I could ever change that. I believe if you throw a rock in the water, it will create ripples. So in any little way that I can, I try to rectify that. But I don't think that it makes a big difference because we are so plagued with this in the world. Have you
Yes.
experienced that type of prejudice in Canada?
Well, I'll tell you this. Racial prejudice is something which is ubiquitous. No society has the luxury of saying that we are immune or we are not affected by this.
Right.
Canada is no exception. It may take a different form than it takes in the United States, but it is there. And persons of different complexion, many persons in moments of candor will admit in very painful language having to experience certain types of things. I'm no exception. Certainly, there are times during my passage that I've been exposed to certain types of attitudes, treatments, comments, and utterances that reflect, in my view, or what I thought then and still think, a certain type of racial animus. But for me, what is most critical, what I've tried to teach my two daughters, is look, you can't change the world on your own, but you can seek to achieve your goals. And if you're exposed to those situations where you are convinced that you are being treated differently on account of racial animus or prejudice, it's the person or persons who are exposing you that treatment. It is they who have the problem.
Exactly. Thank
They
you.
who have the problem.
Thank
And the one luxury you do not have is to internalize that type of animus. You internalize that animus is something that you must avoid. I am motivated, animated by two sayings in particular, among others. One by a former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Eric Williams. There's a comment attributed to him. I can't remember where I saw the reference, but he is reported to have said or to comment at one point that success is your best revenge.
Yes.
This is your best revenge.
Which you've clearly done.
Absolutely. And I also am motivated by what Martin Luther King said, popularized by Obama, President Obama a few years ago, that I am animated by what can be described as the fierce urgency of now. which is to say that if you have a goal, if you have certain tasks to do, certain projects, certain ambitions, you do not have the luxury, or you shouldn't, in my view, put it aside or postpone it or adjourn it to another day. You should always challenge yourself, what I have done to further, to prosecute my goals. What have I done to achieve the success that I have set out to achieve? And you should do so irrespective of the hurdles, the impediments, the rocks placed in your path. I think you have to have that mindset. Again, it's not something you buy at Macy's or one of these large department stores. It is a frame of mind that you developed as a reflection of your maturity, as a reflection of your understanding of the world, as a reflection of the understanding that success is a journey. It's not just a destination. It's something that you have to work towards. And you have to be mindful of the fact that everything which is really lacking in intrinsic worth is very easy to attain. It's those things that have value.
Mhm.
They are
Well,
more difficult to attain.
I can see now that you are a very accomplished, confident gentleman. But I have to ask you, in your younger days, when you were at Johns Hopkins, for example, where did that self-esteem, drive, and strength come from?
Very good question. Very good question. I grew up in a fairly comfortable household. I mean, my parents were not rich, but we were not poor. My father was the controller of customs, but I was one of seven. I couldn't expect that the family wealth would pay my way through university. So I knew from an early age, well, at least during high school, that to the extent that I had any ambitions of post-secondary school studies, it had to be getting some type of award, some type of scholarship. And you know that Dominica then and still is a very small island of 70,000 people. There was one island scholarship given to the person who performed the best at the advanced level Cambridge examinations. There may have been some other scholarships given by NGOs such as USAID and others, CEDA, Canadian International Development Association, and so on. So I knew that when I was at what we call our sixth form college, which is the college before you go on to university, I knew that at least I had passed the subjects I was taking at advanced level, advanced Cambridge level, that's what we call it, to put myself in a position where I could get a scholarship. And I certainly spent a number of countless or sleepless nights um, toiling in the vineyard, to use a metaphoric expression, be able to at least pass those subjects, three of them, and then one called general paper. And fortunately, I was able to do so. And I had to teach at a secondary school, a Catholic school, before applying to get a scholarship. And I was fortunate in that by 1978, I got a USAID scholarship. It's a scholarship given by the United States, sponsored, I should say, or financed for students in underdeveloped islands to be able to pursue their goals. And I was fortunate to have gotten one of those and so on. But my point is, I knew that the only way in which I could move on to university was by applying myself, doing reasonably well, put myself in a position when the trumpet sounded, I was there. So I was very fortunate in that regard. And I went to Mona campus, Jamaica. I did English, philosophy, and history. And again, I wanted to go on to do postgrad work. And yet again, I knew that the only way I would be able to do so, because I had no personal financing or funding to do so, was again to do reasonably well and hopefully to obtain a scholarship to do so. So I was fortunate. I did fairly well. And I graduated with a first class honors degree and a gold medal. And I was fortunate to have gotten a school scholarship from Johns Hopkins to do a doctorate in history. So that's how I ended up in the States and so on. It was a great experience, but at least after 2 years, I left Johns Hopkins at a time when I should have been going on to do my field work for my PhD. I was having second thoughts. And it was then I said that perhaps I should give some thought to my backup plan, which is to say to study law. And it is within that context that I decided, you know what, I'm going to apply to law school. And so said, so done. And as they say, the rest is history. So again, it was just a matter for me of knowing what I had to do. It was a matter of knowing that to the extent that there are impediments of whatever kind, whether it's racial or otherwise, that I would not be deterred by these things. And if you're a person with a biblical type of orientation, you would know that, at least in the Bible, that there are what our religious friends may call miracles of perfection. So you would basically say that these impediments of whatever nature are merely things that test your mettle. They test your character.
Mhm.
They test your determination. They test your dedication. And if in fact you have reached that promised land in terms of your mindset, then you would say mentally that, look, I will not be distracted. And, you know, from a biblical perspective, I'm not an expert in this, but a verse in the Bible which says, no sword against me shall prosper, type of thing.
Yes.
So you form a belief that you will not allow yourself to be distracted or deterred or depressed or discouraged by any kind of impediment, mental or otherwise, thrown in your path.
Didn't you ever feel discouraged? Didn't you ever feel like never? That's amazing.
I can tell you that occasionally, at least I remember a couple of times. I remember one particular time when I was working before I actually went into law school, when I thought a supervisor had attacked me, and the genesis of the attack was racial. And I was enveloped by a strong sense of anger. But that anger was translated into determination that I will not allow you.
I love it.
I'm serious. So what I did, I was at the Workers' Compensation Board, and when I went into law school, I came back during the Christmas holidays, and as I was asked to do, ironically, and there was a supervisor who basically said to me after 2 weeks, without even reviewing my work, that she didn't think that I made any contribution, so she's going to recommend that I not be asked to come back. I told her she could not do that, but she said, yes, she could. I said, okay. So I wrote a letter. I still have the letter and I still have the response. And we're talking about December of 1985. I wrote the letter to the chairman of the board, and I copied that letter to every senior management person at the Workers' Compensation Board. I was told that the chairperson was both a medical doctor and a lawyer, called her into his office and had her apologize. And then he sent me a letter saying basically that I could, anytime I want to come back to work while I was studying law, I can come back. And I still have that letter.
Keep it.
And I keep it. And it was a source of empowerment, a source of determination. And when I went back the following summer, I asked them to put me under her supervision, because I wanted her to know that with or without you, there's the famous Irish band U2. U2, is that the name of it?
Yes, you too.
Bono?
Yeah.
And there's a beautiful song which I always sing to myself, with or without you. The song related to a personal relationship.
Okay.
But to me, it spoke to me because it spoke to the philosophy that I have tried to adhere to, which is to say that to the extent that I have set a goal then I will achieve that goal with or without you. You see?
I love it.
I think that is, in my view anyway, that's the mindset that we have to bring to the table. And one of the things that the Black Lives Matter movement has exposed, as you've hinted at earlier on in the interview, there is the ubiquity and the persistence of racism in this world. In some parts of this world, it is more intense than others.
Mhm.
Some parts of the world, there's a denial. There's a belief that we are not like them in the United States, but it's there. And the question is, what do you do to ensure that it does not result in an abortion of your hopes and in your aspirations? That's the bottom line.
That's key, because
Yeah.
that's what it does to someone who is not wired like you. And lots of people have been derailed their plans because they believe the rah 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 that they got from prejudicial people more than the people that they knew themselves to be. And they lost in the end. So I'm happy I'm speaking to a winner. And so, on this note, I must ask you, what message do you have for a young man or woman in Dominica, in Trinidad, in one of the lesser developed countries that are looking at you and going, I can't do what you did. You must be some kind of a Superman. Because a lot of times young people they can't see beyond what they're hearing from other people. And people will often tell you, you can't do things. When I started this show, everyone says, why is she wasting her time? That show doesn't make any money. And that was 10 years ago, and I just launched a new show. And I know that some of what I've brought to the table has had impact on people's lives. So, on that note, what do you want to say to those people?
Well, look, what I would say to every young person who may have occasion to listen to this interview is that put your hopes, your goals, your energy, resources in education. It is worth pursuing. And I say that because, particularly in the Eastern Caribbean, sadly, many young lives have been dashed, destroyed, damaged by other influences, whether it's drugs, uh, peer pressure, and so on and so forth. But education gives you the ability to achieve. And the good thing, in my view, is that it's much easier now than it was 30 years ago to succeed in terms of your goals. I have made reference to the United States. There are literally tens of thousands of universities in the United States. There is no person, I believe that fervently, who lack the wherewithal, the intellectual wherewithal, to achieve whatever goal he or she sets for himself or herself. Many people tell me, but Doc, I don't have the money. And I say to them, money theoretically is not a problem. Why? Because if you ask yourself one question, where will I be in 5 years or 6 years' time if I remain in the job situation I find myself, compared to where I will be if I pursue this accounting degree, this degree in chemistry, this degree in biology, this degree in law, this degree in medicine? I would be much more advanced if after completing my program, I obtain gainful employment, as most young people do, quite frankly. So that it is not even a matter of money. It is a matter of the discipline and the dedication and the determination and the drive. And that is what we have to bring. That is what we have to push among our young people. Put your hopes in education. Yes, you can put your belief system in God. All that is wonderful. But God helps those who helps themselves.
Absolutely.
You know, you can't buy this at Macy's. You can't buy this mentality at your local department store. It is something that you have to nurture, Some of us are more unfortunate because we can look, for example, to a parental figure, a family figure, and say that I was inspired by him or her. But the world has shrunk. The world has shrunk. We live in a world of social, there are no secrets again. I mean, I can give you an example. Um, when I did my undergrad law degree, I spent hundreds of hours in the law library. When I did a doctorate degree in law, I never set foot in a library. My research was all online.
Mhm.
So that is a powerful educational tool that our young people should exploit to the hilt.
I agree
And
with you.
the more so now because of this COVID thing, I feel like a dinosaur because my computer skills are being developed, but they still lag behind.
You're on
Huh?
Zoom.
When I want to learn about some intricacy and so on, I ask my daughters, you know, so they have a great advantage.
Yes,
They
they
have
do.
a fundamentally big and important advantage in terms of achieving their goals.
Now you are a judge. You're a superior court judge. I got it right this time, right?
You've gotten it right for the whole interview.
Okay. Let me ask you. The climate in the world is so toxic. We've got COVID, we have discrimination against religion, color. I mean, it's sometimes I wake up and I think, where am I today? Because I feel like we've catapulted onto some other planet. And so it's really hard to navigate your way around what we have now based on what we used to call normal. And a lot of people don't do well when they're out of their routine. So, as someone who works in the legal field with all the craziness going on in the world, law is law. I know that it's probably different in Canada to other countries, but what do you want to say to people from that perspective?
Well, look, the law applies to everyone, and everyone who has who has some grievance is entitled to come to a court of law and to be treated impartially. Everyone, irrespective of color, should have the confidence that the color of their skin, their religion, their gender, their sexual orientation will not be a negative factor in any matter that they bring to the court. We as human beings, we have that right. It is a goal that we as a society, and certainly as a justice system in Canada, we strive to achieve. Have we reached that promised land as yet? Not quite. There have been many studies in terms of our criminal justice system, which show that disproportionately persons of color are detained at higher proportions before what we call pre-trial detention before other persons. There are studies which show that persons from our indigenous communities, Aboriginal communities, are detained at higher rates than, for example, persons from the majoritarian communities. So our system is not perfect. But as long as we are committed to eliminate those factors in our system which hinder or impede the goal of achieving a justice system which is fair, which treats persons equally, a system where there is no bias, conscious or unconscious, as long as we are committed to that goal, then that is the redemptive factor in our system of justice. It is something that has to be worked on a daily basis. I can tell you historically that our system did not pay attention to issues of discrimination, issues of commercial enterprises, treating persons of color. In the early decades of the last century, many appellate decisions upheld the right of a business person to discriminate against persons of color in their establishments. We have moved away from that. We have moved away from the philosophy which dictated that anyone who owns a commercial establishment was free to serve or not to serve whoever he or she wanted to.
Right.
There were cases in the early decades of the last century where certain persons of color were banned from certain sections of theaters.
I know.
We have moved away from that type of discrimination. We have moved away from situations where certain individuals of color could not attend certain schools. Our law has moved away from upholding that type of blatant discrimination. But the job is not done. The goal has not been fully met. This is a process. This is a continuous struggle for persons, for the system to treat people, if I may borrow a phrase from Martin Luther King,
Please.
not on the basis of the color of their skin or their sexual orientation or gender, but the contents of their character. And the system of our justice system, as in others, that is the great task that it has to address. It cannot fail to address that task, because failure would result or would create an illegitimate system, one which only serves the wealthy,
Exactly.
one which only serves the majoritarian community. And I'm happy to say that it's certainly in Canada that at least there's a recognition that our system of justice has an obligation, because we are a multicultural society. We have a society of many different peoples from many walks of life, from many parts of this world. We have an obligation to ensure that the justice meted out to this person is the same justice meted out to that person of color, or that person with a different sexual orientation, or different race, different gender, or different religion. That is the big challenge for our world society, so the Western civilization as we speak to it. And this is the promise of the Black Lives Matter movement, to bring to the table the realization that this is not a matter of business as usual, because we know the consequences of business as usual. You know much better than I. You know the consequences of business as usual in the United States. There has to be a new paradigm, one based on equality, one based on fairness, one based on respect, one based on acceptance. You cannot cast people in any type of psychological or ethnological or social silos. We have to move away from that.
I am so grateful. I could just keep on doing this. Maybe I know that you're writing a book, and so we're out of time, but if you could tell us quickly about your book, I'd like to invite you back when it's complete, so we
Sure.
can do a segment on it if you have the time and if you're willing.
Yes, I'm writing a book on a gentleman, former Prime Minister of Dominica. His name is Roosevelt Douglas. Why Roosevelt Douglas? You may not know, because you may not have been born as yet. I say that flippantly. In February of 1969, there was a famous incident at a Canadian university called Sir George Williams University. And he was one of the persons involved in that incident. It resulted in the burning of the computer department of the university. And the action arose after 7 students, actually, if my memory serves me right, I think it's 6 or 7. They alleged that the professor was discriminated against them and giving them low marks so that they do not enter medical school. And that incident, sadly, ended up in a situation, a conflagration, where the computer department of the university was burned down. And there was a subsequent trial, and Rosie Douglas was convicted, sentenced to jail. He served a number of months in custody. He went back to Dominica. And in January of 2000, he became the Prime Minister of Dominica, sadly, and unfortunately, he died 9 months later. So I have undertaken, because it seems to me that his life is very significant on a number of fronts, to do a biography of his life. I know the family, let's put it that way. And I hope to finish that work in the next few months. But it's a work which deals with a number of issues that are very relevant. Racial equality, racial discrimination, the fight for justice, Pan-Africanism, a number of issues that resonate today. And I've made it my mission to bring to the table that book and hopefully to enlighten people about the past, to hopefully stimulate the younger generation, the dignity of engaging in what the late John Lewis described as the good trouble, to ensure that each generation has a certain mandate or duty, take up the mantle, struggle in whatever way he or she deems it to be, and to try to make the world a better place, a more equal place, where we can at least view ourselves as equals, as opposed to viewing ourselves as the others. And it seems to me that that is an ongoing struggle. And whether we like it or not, we are all involved in that struggle.
We are. Regardless, we are.
Absolutely.
I am so very grateful, Dr. Andre, that you took time on a Saturday to let me do this with you. I am a better person for this time.
That's flattery not going to get you anywhere.
It's true. And I am sure I'm not the only one that is going to be impacted by this. So I thank you very much again. And thank you for watching Conversations with Jennylyn. When a conversation is all you need to be inspired, and I'm 1,000% sure Dr. Andre is going to inspire you. And stay tuned, he'll be back. And I will see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.